Today's story explores a pivotal moment in galactic history. They killed one human. Earth's response shocked the galaxy. Humanity stands on the brink of galactic war, but the resolve of a single species will test the very fabric of the universe. Let's dive in. The galaxy held its breath as the execution of Captain Elias Corvin was broadcast across every major communication channel. It was a deliberate act of cruelty, orchestrated by the Kolvati Dominion to remind every species under its iron fist that defiance would not be tolerated. The footage was grainy, captured from a distance, but the scene was unmistakably horrifying. Corvin, bound in electromagnetic shackles, stood on a cold, metallic platform aboard the Dominion's flagship, the Vindicator. Admiral Kren Thalos loomed behind him, his 4 reptilian eyes glowing with sadistic glee. "Let this serve as a warning to all who would defy the Dominion," Thalos declared, his voice reverberating across the galaxy. Corvin, battered but defiant, lifted his head. Blood matted his dark hair, and his face was swollen from the beatings he'd endured. Yet his gaze burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the screen. "I represent Earth," he said, his voice raw but unwavering. "And you've made a mistake. We don't forget. We don't forgive. Kill me, and you'll see what humanity is capable of." Thalos sneered, his mandibles clicking in disdain. Without a word, he raised his plasma blade and brought it down. The screen went black. On Earth, the silence was deafening. The footage spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was downloaded, shared, and streamed across every corner of the planet. From the sprawling megacities of New Shanghai and Neo-Tokyo to the rural settlements in what remained of the American heartland, billions of humans watched as one of their own was slaughtered like an animal. In New Geneva, where the United Terran Council convened, President Adira Chen stood before a hastily gathered assembly of world leaders. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edges of the podium. She'd seen the footage a dozen times already, and each viewing felt like a fresh wound. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice tight with controlled rage, "we have just witnessed the murder of one of our own, a diplomat who carried no weapon, who sought only to negotiate in peace. The Kolvati Dominion believes this will intimidate us, that it will teach us our place. They are wrong." Her words echoed through the chamber, met with a mix of somber nods and murmurs of agreement. "What place do they think we have, Madam President?" a voice called out. It was General Darius Voss, a towering figure with a reputation for tactical brilliance. He leaned forward, his gray eyes hard as steel. "Do they think we're still a backwater species ripe for conquest? That we'll simply roll over and accept their dominance?" Chen's lips tightened. "That's precisely what they think." "Then they don't know us," Voss said, rising to his feet. His voice grew louder, carrying the weight of millennia of human struggle. "They don't know what we've endured. Wars, famine, extinction-level events. And yet, here we stand. They've killed one of us, yes, but they've also unified us. And now, they're about to learn what it means to face humanity's wrath." Across the galaxy, the reaction to Earth's grief and anger was mixed. On trade hubs and neutral colonies, alien commentators speculated on humanity's next move. The Kolvati dismissed Earth's outrage as impotent bluster. What could one planet, with its fledgling space fleet and rudimentary technology, hope to accomplish against the Dominion's sprawling empire? But beneath the surface, fear began to spread. Humanity had always been unpredictable, even by galactic standards. No other species had risen from its homeworld so quickly. In just 2 centuries, humans had gone from breaking the light-speed barrier to establishing colonies across multiple star systems. They were resourceful, inventive, and unrelenting. And now, they were angry. In the aftermath of Corvin's death, the Terran Defense Corps mobilized in ways the galaxy had never seen before. Every military asset, was put on high alert. Orbital shipyards worked around the clock to retrofit Earth's aging fleet with experimental weaponry. Quantum engineers fine-tuned AI systems to predict Kolvathi strategies, while ground-based laboratories accelerated the production of advanced railguns and EMP weaponry. It wasn't just the military. Civilians rallied in solidarity. Volunteer networks formed to support the war effort, from hacking into Dominion systems to coordinating supply chains for the growing fleet. Even children played their part, uploading videos to the galactic web with the now famous hashtag #for Corvin. Humanity was a species united by tragedy and driven by a singular purpose: vengeance. 3 weeks after Corvin's execution, President Chen addressed the galaxy once more. This time, her tone was different. The grief in her eyes was replaced with cold determination. "Admiral Krenthalos, Kolvathi High Command, and to the Dominion as a whole," she began, staring directly into the camera. "You believe you've taught us a lesson. You believe you've demonstrated your power. But all you've done is awaken something far greater than you can comprehend." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Humanity is no stranger to adversity. We've survived extinction events, global wars, and every attempt to break us. And each time, we've emerged stronger. You killed one of us. Just one. And for that, we will show you what happens when you challenge humanity. Her voice dropped, each word sharp as a blade. "We are coming. What do you think humanity's next move should be? Should they strike immediately, or wait for the perfect moment? How would you feel standing in humanity's shoes, outgunned but determined to make a stand?" If you're enjoying this chapter, don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic tales of human defiance and resilience. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, The Call to Arms. In the weeks following President Chen's declaration, Earth transformed. Cities once bustling with commerce and culture shifted into centers of war preparation. Massive holographic banners hung in public squares, featuring the face of Captain Elias Corvin and emblazoned with the rallying cry, "One of us." Factories that once produced consumer goods were retooled overnight to manufacture weapons, drones, and armor. Shipyards in orbit around Luna and Mars worked tirelessly, converting civilian freighters into makeshift warships and constructing new vessels designed for one purpose: vengeance. The Terran Defense Corps, stretched thin yet resolute, issued a galaxy-wide call for volunteers. The response was overwhelming. Millions from all walks of life, miners from Titan, engineers from the asteroid belts, even cybernetic-enhanced athletes from Earth's megacities, pledged their skills and lives to the cause. Humanity had no choice but to throw everything it had into the fight. Commander Darius Voss stood on the bridge of the TNS Resolute, the flagship of Earth's fledgling fleet. He gazed out at the vast expanse of space, his face etched with the weight of what was to come. Around him, officers buzzed with activity, their voices sharp and focused as they coordinated fleet movements and logistics. Behind him, Dr. Alara Solis, Earth's foremost quantum AI specialist, stepped forward. She was young, too young, some said, for the responsibility thrust upon her. But her mind was unparalleled. Her dark curls framed a face marked by sleepless nights and quiet determination. "We're outnumbered," Alara said, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. "The Dominion's fleet is over 1,000 strong. We have 70 ships. Most of them aren't even designed for combat." Voss turned, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers. "Then we fight smart, use their arrogance against them." Ilara hesitated. "Admiral Thalos isn't a fool. He knows we can't win a conventional war. That's why he's pushing for a decisive strike. He wants to end this before we have a chance to organize. And that's exactly why we won't fight conventionally," Voss replied. His voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had survived impossible odds before. "What's the status of Project Prometheus?" Alara's expression darkened. "It's risky. The AI algorithms are untested, and the quantum railgun platforms have only been deployed in simulations. If something goes wrong—" "It won't," Voss interrupted. I've read your reports, Doctor. I trust you. Humanity trusts you. Her breath caught for a moment, but she nodded. I'll make it work. Just give me time. On Earth, President Chen addressed the planet in a broadcast that would become legendary. She stood in the ruins of the United Nations headquarters in New York, a deliberate choice, meant to remind humanity of its capacity to rebuild and endure. My fellow humans, she began, her voice resonating with both grief and determination. We stand on the precipice of annihilation. The Kulvathi Dominion believes they can crush us with their might, that our unity is fragile and our will can be broken. They are wrong. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. For centuries, humanity has faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. We've conquered disease, weathered cataclysmic disasters, and risen from the ashes of war. We are survivors. And now, we must fight, not just for ourselves, but for every species oppressed by the Dominion's tyranny. For freedom, for Elias Corvin, for our future. The response was immediate. Across Earth and its colonies, people gathered in public squares to watch the broadcast. Cheers erupted, fists were raised, and chants of "For Corvin" filled the air. Listen up, he said, addressing the dozen soldiers in the cramped briefing room. This isn't a straight-up fight. We're hitting their supply line, crippling their logistics. Quick in, quick out. Stick to the plan, and we'll make it back in one piece. One of the younger recruits, a woman named Layla Ortiz, raised her hand. Sir, what happens if we're detected? Cross met her gaze. He didn't sugarcoat it. Then we improvise. The ambush began perfectly. Using advanced cloaking technology provided by the Xi'an, the Vigilant and its escort ships slipped past the Dominion's perimeter defenses. Railgun platforms, mounted on what were once cargo haulers, tore through the convoy's unarmed freighters with devastating precision. Within minutes, the supply line was in chaos. But then, as always, something went wrong. "Commander!" shouted the tactical officer. "We've got incoming! Dominion frigates dropping out of warp!" Cross's jaw tightened. "All ships, evasive maneuvers. Deploy decoys and prepare for immediate extraction." The Vigilant banked hard, its hull shuddering as plasma bolts streaked past. Cross gripped his console, barking orders as the Terran fleet scrambled to retreat. One of their ships, a retrofitted mining vessel, was hit and began to spiral out of control. "Get them out of there!" Cross shouted. Alara Solis's experimental AI integrated into the fleet's systems sprang into action. It calculated an escape trajectory in milliseconds, coordinating the fleet's movements with surgical precision. The Vigilant fired a series of decoy drones, creating a false target cluster that drew the Dominion's fire. It worked. Barely. As the Terran fleet jumped to safety, Cross allowed himself a moment to breathe. They'd survived, but only just. The galaxy watches. The success of Operation Spectre sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time, the Kulvathi Dominion faced a direct challenge from a species they had dismissed as insignificant. On neutral colonies and trade hubs, whispers began to spread. If humanity could stand against the Dominion, perhaps others could too. The seeds of rebellion were being sown. But on Earth, the mood was somber. The cost of the operation, though successful, was high. The names of the fallen were broadcast alongside images of grieving families. President Chen addressed the public once more, her tone resolute. "This is only the beginning," she said. "We will mourn our dead, but we will not falter. The Kulvathi believe they can outlast us. We'll show them they're wrong." Reflective engagement. What would you have done in Commander Cross's place? Could you risk everything to cripple the enemy's supply line, knowing the odds were stacked against you? Enjoying the journey? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic tales of defiance and resilience. Stay tuned for Chapter 3, The Shadow Strike. The Kulvathi Dominion prided itself on control. of their fleets, their colonies, and the flow of information across their vast empire. To the outside galaxy, they were untouchable, their authority absolute. But for the first time, cracks began to show. Supply lines faltered, outposts went silent, fleets scrambled to respond to threats they couldn't see. And in the shadows, humanity struck like a viper. The small mining outpost of Jarava was an unremarkable speck in Kolvathi-controlled space. Situated on the edge of a barren asteroid belt, its primary purpose was the extraction of tritium, a fuel source critical to the Dominion's war effort. It was heavily fortified, ringed by automated turrets and patrolled by frigates. No one expected an attack. That was their first mistake. 3 cloaked Terran ships drifted silently into the asteroid belt, their surfaces shimmering faintly as the Xiarn stealth technology distorted the light around them. On board the lead ship, TNS Phantom, Commander Aiden Cross sat in his command chair, eyes locked on the tactical display. Every breath in the dimly lit room seemed amplified in the silence. "Targets locked," came the soft voice of Ensign Layla Ortiz. She sat at the weapons console, her hands hovering over the controls. Despite her youth, her expression was cold and focused. Cross nodded. "Fire." A volley of railgun rounds streaked through the void, invisible until they struck the outpost's orbital defenses. Turrets exploded in brilliant bursts of flame and debris. The Kolvathi frigates scrambled to respond, but the Phantom and its sister ships moved with surgical precision, targeting engines and weapon systems before the enemy could retaliate. On the surface, Terran commandos infiltrated the mining facility. Dressed in adaptive camo suits and equipped with neural-linked HUDs, they moved like wraiths through the dimly lit corridors. Explosions rocked the facility as sabotage teams planted charges on key infrastructure, power generators, communication hubs, and tritium storage tanks. The entire operation took less than an hour. As the commandos exfiltrated, the charges detonated in a synchronized symphony of destruction. Flames consumed the outpost, casting an eerie glow across the asteroid belt. From the bridge of the Phantom, Cross watched the explosions with grim satisfaction. "Message to the fleet," he said. "Target neutralized. Prepare for extraction." The Kolvathi response was swift. Admiral Kren Thalos himself addressed the Dominion High Command in an emergency meeting. His reptilian features contorted in rage. "This is not the act of a mere rebellion," he hissed. "This is calculated warfare. They've taken out 6 outposts in as many days. Our fleets are chasing shadows while our resources burn." High Chancellor Vryn, her voice calm but laced with authority, responded, "Admiral, you assured us that humanity posed no significant threat. Explain how this has happened." Thalos's mandibles twitched, a sign of barely restrained fury. "Their tactics are unconventional. They've adapted Xiarn technology to evade our sensors, and their railgun platforms are far more advanced than we anticipated. But they can't sustain this. They lack the resources to mount a prolonged campaign." "See that they don't," Vryn said coldly. "The Dominion cannot afford to appear weak." Back on Earth, the price of the war was beginning to show. The Shadow campaign had claimed dozens of Terran lives, and each operation pushed humanity's limited resources to their breaking point. In a secure war room beneath the United Terran Council headquarters, President Adira Chen met with her top advisors. The holographic table in front of them displayed a map of Kolvathi-controlled space, red markers indicating recent attacks. "Our strikes are effective," said General Voss, his voice gravelly from years of barking orders. "But we're playing a dangerous game. If the Dominion catches us off guard, one bad engagement could wipe out half our fleet." Chen leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "What's the alternative, General? Wait for them to bring the fight to Earth? We've already seen what they're capable of." Ilara Solis, seated beside her, interjected. "We need more allies. The Xiarn have helped with stealth tech, but we need real firepower. Ships, weapons, manpower. There are species out there who hate the Dominion as much as we do. If we can convince them to join us, and if they won't?" Voss asked. Ilara hesitated, then met his gaze. Then we do what we've always done. We adapt. We survive. The shadow strikes didn't just weaken the Dominion's infrastructure, they ignited a spark of hope across the galaxy. On neutral colonies and under Dominion-occupied worlds, whispers of rebellion began to spread. On the planet Kralath, a mining colony enslaved by the Dominion for centuries, a young Rhinar named Selik watched the Terran broadcasts with growing admiration. The human's defiance resonated with him, stirring something long buried, a desire for freedom. They fight for themselves, his elder brother said, shaking his head. They won't come for us. Selik's jaw tightened. Maybe not. But they've shown us it's possible to fight back. If they can stand against the Dominion, so can we. A dangerous gambit. As the Shadow campaign escalated, humanity prepared for its boldest strike yet. An attack on the orbital shipyard of Krosav, one of the Dominion's most vital production facilities. The operation, codenamed Harbinger, would require every ounce of Terran ingenuity. In the days leading up to the mission, tensions ran high. On board the Phantom, Cross gathered his crew for a final briefing. The room was silent as he outlined the plan, his voice steady but firm. "This is the most dangerous mission we've faced," he said. "If we succeed, we'll cripple the Dominion's fleet production for months. If we fail..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ortiz raised her hand. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Cross nodded. "We've seen what they've done to their enemies. If we're captured..." Her voice faltered, but she steadied herself. "I just want to say, it's been an honor, sir." Cross's gaze softened. "No one's getting captured, Ortiz. We go in, we hit them hard, and we get out. Humanity's counting on us." If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more tales of defiance and resilience. Stay tuned for Chapter 4, Unity in Defiance. The galaxy, once fragmented by distrust and subjugation, began to stir with a new sense of purpose. Humanity's defiance was no longer just an act of survival. It was a beacon, drawing the oppressed, the broken, and the forgotten into a movement that would reshape the stars. In a dimly lit chamber aboard the TNS Resolute, representatives from Earth and its new allies gathered around a holographic table. The Giarn, known for their shimmering, chameleon-like skin, sat opposite humanity's delegation. Beside them were the Rhinar, their thin, willowy forms adorned with ceremonial robes. Even the Grath, a brutish, warlike species who once thrived as mercenaries for the Dominion, had sent an emissary. President Adira Chen stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding. The light from the hologram illuminated the lines of exhaustion on her face, but her eyes burned with determination. "This is our moment," she began, her voice calm but firm. "For centuries, the Dominion has ruled through fear and division. They've pitted species against each other, ensuring no one could rise against them. But now they've made a mistake. They've underestimated the one thing they could never control, our unity." The Shi'arn envoy, a female named Cyril, whose skin shifted hues with her emotions, folded her long fingers together. "Unity is a fragile thing, President Chen. Fear and doubt are the Dominion's tools. They will seek to break us before we truly begin." Chen nodded. "That's why we need to act now, not as humans, not as Xi'an or Rhinar or Grath, but as a coalition, a force greater than the sum of its parts." The Grath emissary, a hulking figure named Borath, rumbled with laughter. "I like this human. Bold words, but bold words mean nothing without action." Chen smiled faintly. "Action is coming, Borath. The question is, will you stand with us when it does?" The coalition was born that day, though its formation was far from smooth. Mistrust lingered among its members. The Grath demanded assurances of honor and glory in battle. The Xi'an, wary of risking their fragile population, insisted on strategies that prioritized stealth and precision. The Rhinar, traumatized by centuries of oppression, hesitated to commit fully, fearing the Dominion's wrath. It fell to humanity to hold the fragile alliance together. Commander Darius Voss, who had become a symbol of Earth's resilience, personally led joint training exercises aboard orbital platforms. Side by side, soldiers from vastly different worlds learned to work together. Grath shock troops paired with human tacticians, Xi'an infiltration teams supported by Terran engineers, and Rhynar medics tending to the wounded regardless of species. One day, during a particularly grueling simulation, tensions boiled over. A Grath warrior accused a human soldier of cowardice after a failed maneuver. The two squared off, fists raised, while the rest of the trainees watched in tense silence. Before blows could be exchanged, Voss stepped between them. "Enough!" he barked, his voice echoing through the hangar. "The Dominion is out there, watching and waiting for us to fall apart. You think they'll care who threw the first punch when they glass another planet?" The Grath warrior growled, but lowered his fists. The human soldier, still seething, muttered an apology. Voss pointed at them both. "Save that fire for the enemy. We need every single one of you to win this war." The incident became a turning point. Slowly but surely the coalition began to trust one another. Not fully, not yet, but enough to fight as one. While alliances formed in orbit, on Earth, the public rallied behind a growing movement. Statues of Captain Elias Corvin were erected in every major city, his likeness immortalized as a symbol of courage and sacrifice. Holographic projections in public squares played recordings of his final words, and the hashtag #OneOfUs trended on every galactic network. Children wrote letters to soldiers on the front lines, their simple words of encouragement often carried into battle as reminders of what was at stake. Artists, musicians, and poets turned Corvin's story into a cultural phenomenon. Humanity's rage and grief had become something greater, a shared purpose, a collective hope. But not everyone shared the same vision. In underground forums and shadowed corners of Earth's cities, whispers of dissent grew louder. Some believed the war was a lost cause, that humanity's defiance would lead only to extinction. Others questioned the cost of unity, fearing the coalition's members would turn on Earth the moment the Dominion was defeated. President Chen addressed these concerns in a televised speech, her voice unwavering. "Unity is not the absence of conflict. It's the choice to stand together despite our differences. Yes, the road ahead is uncertain. Yes, the cost will be high. But the alternative is unthinkable. We fight because we must, because freedom is worth every sacrifice." The coalition's first true test came during the Battle of Telkros, a Dominion-controlled star system critical to their supply chain. Intelligence reports suggested the system was lightly defended, but when the coalition fleet arrived, they found a trap. Dozens of Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the fleet in a pincer formation. Chaos erupted as plasma bolts lit up the void. Ships on both sides were torn apart in the opening salvo. Commander Voss, aboard the TNS Resolute, quickly assessed the situation. "All ships, form up. Xi'an stealth units, flank their rear lines. Grath shock troops, prepare for boarding actions. Rhynar medics, stand by for casualties." The coalition's forces moved with surprising coordination. Xi'an cloaked fighters darted behind enemy lines, targeting the Dominion's command ships. Grath warriors, encased in heavy armor, launched boarding pods that slammed into enemy hulls like meteors. Human ships, equipped with experimental railguns, provided covering fire, their projectiles tearing through Dominion shields. Amid the carnage, a Rhynar medical frigate was hit, its engines crippled. As Dominion ships closed in for the kill, a human corvette, the Ember, placed itself between the frigate and the enemy, absorbing the brunt of the assault. The Rhynar captain, watching as the corvette was destroyed, whispered a silent prayer of thanks. In the end, the coalition emerged victorious, but the cost was staggering. Dozens of ships were lost and hundreds of lives were sacrificed. Yet the message was clear. The Dominion was not invincible. The Coalition could fight and win. The victory at Telcross sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time, a united front had stood against the Dominion and prevailed. Neutral systems began to reconsider their stance, while whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire on occupied worlds. Back on Earth, celebrations were tempered by grief. President Chen addressed the Coalition's leaders via hologram, her voice filled with quiet resolve. This war is far from over, but today we've proven that unity is our greatest strength. Together, we are unstoppable. The galaxy was holding its breath. After the Coalition's victory at Telcross, hope burned brighter than ever, but so did the Dominion's fury. The Kolvati's retaliation was swift and devastating, targeting any system suspected of aiding the rebellion. Entire colonies were razed, their populations enslaved or executed. Amid the chaos, the Coalition's leaders gathered in a hidden orbital station, cloaked in the shadow of a dying star. They were preparing for a mission that could change the course of the war, or doom them all. A fractured council. The tension in the war room was palpable. Holograms of the Coalition's leaders flickered across the circular table. President Adira Chen stood at its center, her hands resting on the edge as she addressed the council. "Our intelligence confirms it," she said, her voice steady but grim. "The Dominion's command nexus on Vilcaris is their Achilles heel. If we take it out, their entire fleet coordination will collapse." Borath, the Grath emissary, growled low in his throat. "And how, exactly, do you plan to storm the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy? This isn't a skirmish in an asteroid belt, human. This is suicide." Chen met his gaze without flinching. "It's a risk we have to take. If we wait, the Dominion will rebuild its losses. They'll come at us with full force, and this alliance will crumble before we can strike back." Cyril, the Zharn envoy, shifted nervously in her seat, her skin rippling with iridescent hues. Even with cloaking technology, infiltrating Vilcaris is nearly impossible. The orbital defenses alone would destroy half our fleet before we reach the surface. "That's why we won't use the fleet," said Commander Darius Voss, stepping into the room. His presence commanded instant attention. "We'll send a strike team, small, fast, and precise. We'll hit their command center, disable the Nexus, and extract before they know what hit them." The room erupted into debate. Some called it madness, others a necessary gamble. Chen let them argue, her mind racing with the weight of the decision. Finally, she raised her hand, and the room fell silent. "This mission isn't just about strategy," she said. "It's about sending a message to the Dominion, to the galaxy, to ourselves. If we're not willing to risk everything for freedom, then what's the point of fighting?" Her words hung in the air like a challenge. One by one, the leaders nodded. The strike team was handpicked from the Coalition's finest. Humans, Zharn, Grath, and even Renar stood side by side, their differences set aside for the mission. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Layla Ortiz, who had earned a reputation for her bravery during the Battle of Telcross. "You nervous?" asked Cross, adjusting his gear as the team prepared to board the stealth shuttle. Ortiz smirked. "Nervous? Number terrified? Absolutely." Cross chuckled, but his expression turned serious. "This isn't just another mission, Ortiz. If we fail, Earth won't survive what comes next." Ortiz nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "We won't fail, sir. We can't." As the team boarded the shuttle, the hangar fell silent. Soldiers and engineers watched them go, some offering salutes, others whispering prayers. The ship's engines roared to life, and it disappeared into the void, cloaked from sight. The infiltration. Vilcaris loomed ahead, a massive industrialized planet surrounded by a latticework of orbital defenses. The Dominion's fleet hovered nearby, a menacing reminder of their overwhelming power. Inside the cloaked shuttle, the strike team prepared for the drop. Voss stood at the front, his voice calm but commanding. "Remember your training, stick to the plan, and we'll make it out alive. As the shuttle breached the atmosphere, turbulence rocked the cabin. The team gripped their harnesses, their faces pale but resolute. Ortiz glanced out the viewport, her breath catching as she saw the sprawling cityscape below. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and patrolled by Dominion soldiers. The shuttle landed in a desolate industrial sector, its cloaking field shimmering briefly before deactivating. The team disembarked, moving silently through the shadows. Shi'ar infiltrators led the way, their natural camouflage blending seamlessly with the environment. "Targets ahead," one of them whispered, pointing to a heavily guarded checkpoint. Voss signaled for the team to halt. "Ortiz, take the sniper position. Borath, you're with me. Cyril, get those cloaks ready. This is going to get loud." The plan unfolded like clockwork. Ortiz's rifle cracked, taking out the guards before they could raise the alarm. Borath charged forward, his massive frame smashing through barriers as the rest of the team followed. Cyril activated a holographic decoy, drawing enemy fire away from the group. By the time reinforcements arrived, the team was already inside the command center. The Nexus. The Nexus was a towering structure of alien design, its central console glowing with streams of data. Ilara Solis's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm linking into the system now. Keep them off me while I disable their fleet coordination." Voss barked orders, and the team formed a defensive perimeter. The sound of plasma fire filled the air as Dominion soldiers swarmed the building. Ortiz picked them off one by one, her rifle never missing a shot. "We're outnumbered!" shouted Borath, swinging his massive axe to fend off attackers. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster!" Ilara's voice was calm but strained. "Almost there. Just a little longer." A Dominion officer burst into the room, aiming directly at Voss. Before he could pull the trigger, Ortiz fired, the shot hitting its mark. "I owe you one," Voss muttered. "Buy me a drink if we live through this," Ortiz replied. Finally, Ilara's voice rang out. "Got it! The Nexus is offline!" The team's relief was short-lived. An explosion rocked the building, and alarms blared as Dominion reinforcements closed in. "Time to go!" Voss shouted. "The sacrifice!" The shuttle was waiting, its engines roaring as the team sprinted toward it. Plasma bolts rained down around them, and Ortiz stumbled, her legs searing with pain. Voss turned back, grabbing her arm. "Leave me!" Ortiz gasped. "You'll never make it if—" "Not a chance," Voss snapped, hauling her to her feet. Borath covered their retreat, his massive frame absorbing enemy fire. As the shuttle lifted off, he stayed behind, a defiant roar echoing through the chaos. The team watched in silence as the planet disappeared below them. Ortiz clenched her fists, tears streaming down her face. "We'll remember him," Voss said quietly. "His sacrifice won't be in vain." The turning point. The destruction of the Nexus crippled the Dominion's fleet coordination, forcing them into disarray. For the first time, the Coalition had the upper hand. Across the galaxy, rebellions erupted as oppressed species seized the opportunity to rise against their captors. But the cost weighed heavily. Borath's sacrifice was a grim reminder of what was at stake. In a quiet moment, Ortiz stared at the stars, her voice barely a whisper. "Was it worth it?" Voss placed a hand on her shoulder. "It has to be. For him, for all of us." Enjoying the story? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more tales of courage and sacrifice. Stay tuned for Chapter 6. The Dominion had never known fear. For centuries, their fleets had swept across the stars, their enemies crushed beneath the weight of their war machine. But now, for the first time, that fear was palpable, echoing in the halls of their command centers, rippling through the ranks of their armies. Humanity and its coalition had brought the war to the Dominion's doorstep, and Earth's vengeance was coming. The coalition fleet gathered in the shadow of a dying star, their ships a patchwork of cultures, technologies, and improvisation. Human warships bristled with newly upgraded railguns, their hulls emblazoned with slogans like "For Corvin" and "Never Again." Shi'ar's stealth vessels shimmered like mirages, while Grath dreadnoughts loomed massive and unyielding, their hulls scarred from centuries of battle. In the heart of the fleet, the TNS Resolute stood as a symbol of defiance, its command center alive with tension. Commander Darius Voss paced the bridge, his face a mask of focus. Every detail had been planned, every contingency accounted for. But the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on him. "We're out of time," Elara Solis said quietly, standing beside him. She'd barely slept in days, her eyes bloodshot but determined. "The Dominion is mobilizing faster than we expected. If we don't strike now, they'll recover." Voss nodded. "We strike now then. No speeches, no delays. We hit them where it hurts, and we don't stop until the Dominion falls." He turned to his crew, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This is it, people. The Battle of Vilcaris, the endgame. Whatever happens out there, remember this. We're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for every species that's ever been crushed under the Dominion's boot. This is for them, for us, for Corvin." A cheer rose from the bridge, fierce and defiant. The fleet emerged from hyperspace just outside the Vilcari system, the Dominion stronghold gleaming in the distance. Hundreds of Dominion warships awaited them, their formation an impenetrable wall of firepower. But the Coalition didn't hesitate. "Xi'an vessels, advance!" Voss barked into the comms. The Xi'an ships vanished from sight, their cloaking fields engaging as they darted toward the enemy lines. Moments later, explosions erupted across the Dominion fleet as stealth teams targeted critical systems. The Dominion responded, firing blindly, their precision faltering without the coordination of their command nexus. "Human ships, engage! Grath dreadnoughts, form the spear!" The Coalition surged forward. Railguns thundered, their rounds punching through Dominion shields with terrifying efficiency. Grath warships rammed into enemy vessels, their sheer bulk overwhelming even the largest Dominion cruisers. On the TNS Resolute, Voss gripped the edge of his console, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Focus fire on their flanks. Don't let them regroup. Elara, status on their reinforcements." Elara's hands flew across her console. "Intercepting transmissions now. They're calling for backup, but it'll take at least 20 minutes for reinforcements to arrive." "Good," Voss said. "We'll finish this before they get here." While the fleet clashed in orbit, the Coalition's ground forces launched their assault on the surface of Vilcaris. Lieutenant Commander Layla Ortiz led a mixed unit of human, Xi'an, and Grath soldiers through the city's labyrinthine streets. Dominion soldiers poured out of bunkers in defensive positions, their plasma rifles cutting through the air. "Take cover!" Ortiz shouted, ducking behind a crumbled wall. Her heart pounded as explosions shook the ground around her. A Grath warrior beside her roared, charging headlong into enemy lines with a massive energy hammer. Ortiz used the distraction to flank the Dominion troops, her rifle precise and deadly. "Push forward!" she yelled, rallying her team. "We need to reach the control tower." The fighting was brutal, every inch of ground contested. Ortiz's team suffered heavy casualties, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Back in orbit, the Coalition fleet was on the brink of collapse. The Dominion's reinforcements had arrived earlier than expected, and the tide of the battle was shifting. "We're losing ships too fast!" Elara shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Voss clenched his fists, his mind racing. "Signal all ships to fall back, except the Grath dreadnoughts. They'll hold the line while we regroup." "A glorious end for a Grath warrior. Do not mourn us, Voss. Fight well." The Grath dreadnoughts surged forward, their massive hulls absorbing the Dominion's firepower. One by one they fell, but their sacrifice gave the Coalition time to regroup. "Commander," Elara said, her voice breaking. "They're gone." Voss nodded, his jaw tight. "And we're still here. All ships advance. This end now." On the surface, Ortiz and her team reached the control tower, their path littered with the bodies of friend and foe alike. Elara guided them remotely, hacking into Dominion systems to disable traps and open doors. "We're inside," Ortiz panted, her rifle shaking in her hands. How do we shut this thing down? Alara's voice crackled through the comms. There's a central core on the top floor. Destroy it, and the Dominion's fleet will lose coordination. Ortiz led her team up the tower, every step a battle. By the time they reached the core, only a handful of soldiers remained. It's beautiful, one of them whispered, staring at the glowing, pulsating structure. Ortiz set the charges, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Not for long. Alara, we're setting the timer for 3 minutes. Get ready to pull us out. As they fled the tower, the charges detonated, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. Dominion ships in orbit faltered, their movements erratic and disorganized. Now's our chance, Voss said. All ships, full assault! The coalition surged forward, their weapons tearing through the Dominion's scattered fleet. One by one, the Dominion warships fell, until only silence remained. The coalition had won, but the cost was staggering. The Grath fleet was gone. Half the human ships were destroyed. Thousands of lives had been lost. On the surface of Vilcaris, Ortiz sat among the rubble, her body battered and her spirit exhausted. Voss's voice came through her comms. You did it, Ortiz. It's over. She looked up at the smoke-filled sky, tears streaming down her face. Yeah, it's over. The Dominion's defeat sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Their empire, once thought unbreakable, began to crumble as oppressed species rose up in rebellion. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, had proven its strength and its resolve. President Chen addressed the galaxy in a broadcast seen by billions. We have shown that unity can triumph over tyranny, that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire. Today, we begin a new chapter, not as conquerors, but as builders of a brighter future. Could you lead in the face of overwhelming loss, knowing the sacrifices it would require? What would you fight for if everything was at stake? Enjoying this chapter? Don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more epic tales of courage, defiance, and survival. Stay tuned for the final chapter, The Reflection. The galaxy was quiet. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion's fleets no longer prowled the stars, their banners no longer casting a shadow over countless worlds. Their empire, fractured and leaderless, crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. What began as vengeance for one life had blossomed into something far greater: liberation. But the scars of war remained, and with the fires of victory still smoldering, humanity and its allies stood at a crossroads. The aftermath of the Battle of Vilcaris was bittersweet. On board the TNS Resolute, Commander Darius Voss looked out over the ruined planet below, its once pristine cities reduced to rubble. The cost of victory had been higher than anyone anticipated. "How many did we lose?" he asked quietly, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Alara Solis sat beside him, a datapad clutched in her hands. She hesitated before answering. "Half our fleet, thousands on the ground. And that's just us. The Grath." She trailed off, her voice breaking. "Their entire fleet is gone. Borath's people gave everything." Voss closed his eyes, the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. "They didn't just fight for us. They fought for something bigger. We owe them more than words." Alara nodded, but her expression remained somber. "The galaxy will remember what they did, what we did." Back on Earth, President Adira Chen addressed the planet and the galaxy in a broadcast that reached billions. She stood in Unity Square, the site of a monument recently unveiled to honor the fallen. It depicted a towering figure of Captain Elias Corvin, his hand outstretched toward the stars, surrounded by smaller figures representing each member of the coalition. "Today, we honor the sacrifices that brought us to this moment," Chen began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Humanity did not stand alone. The Xi'an, the Grath, the Rhynar, and countless others stood with us, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. Freedom. Her words echoed across war-torn worlds, inspiring hope where despair had once taken root. We've seen the cost of tyranny, and we've paid the price of defiance. Now it is our duty to ensure that no species will ever again suffer under the heel of oppression. Together, we will rebuild, not as conquerors, but as allies. The cheers from the crowd were deafening, their voices a chorus of resilience. Across the galaxy, rebel factions inspired by humanity's victory rose to reclaim their worlds. The seeds of unity, planted in blood and sacrifice, began to bloom. Months later, representatives from dozens of species gathered on the neutral planet of Climax to form a new intergalactic council. The chamber was alive with energy, a kaleidoscope of languages, colors, and cultures coming together for the first time in history. Voss and Ortiz stood among the human delegation, their uniforms crisp but worn from countless battles. Ortiz glanced around, her expression equal parts awe and disbelief. "Think this will work?" she asked. Voss shrugged. "It has to. We didn't come this far to let it all fall apart now." As the council's inaugural session began, President Chen stepped forward, her presence commanding. "We are not here to govern," she said. "We are here to guide, to ensure that no empire rises on the backs of others, to protect the freedom we've fought so hard to achieve." The coalition's charter was signed that day, binding its members to principles of mutual defense, shared prosperity, and the preservation of peace. Humanity, once considered insignificant, now stood at the forefront of this new alliance. In the quiet aftermath, memorials sprang up across the galaxy. On Earth, the families of fallen soldiers gathered in solemn ceremonies, their loved ones' names etched into walls of black stone. On the Grath homeworld, the surviving members of Borath's clan lit ceremonial fires, vowing to rebuild in his honor. Ortiz visited one such memorial on Luna, her steps hesitant. She found Borath's name among the fallen and placed a small token, a Grath battle emblem, beneath it. "You didn't have to fight for us," she whispered. "But you did. Thank you." Nearby, Ilara watched in silence, her own thoughts heavy. "It feels unfinished, doesn't it?" she said after a moment. Ortiz nodded. "The war's over, but it doesn't feel like a victory. Not yet." Ilara placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe it's not about how it feels. Maybe it's about what comes next." Years passed, and the galaxy began to heal. New alliances were forged, and trade routes reopened. Former enemies worked side by side to rebuild what had been lost. And though the scars of war remained, they served as a reminder of the cost of tyranny and the power of unity. Humanity thrived in this new era, their resilience earning them respect among the stars. Earth became a hub of diplomacy and innovation, a beacon for those seeking freedom and justice. The phrase, "one of us," once a rallying cry, became a symbol of solidarity across species, and in the quiet halls of the Coalition's headquarters, a plaque hung above the entrance. It read, "For Elias Corvin, for the fallen, for freedom." On a distant colony, a young Shan child sat with her grandfather, staring up at the night sky. The stars glittered like jewels, and among them, a faint trail of light marked the path of a Terran exploration ship. "Tell me the story again," the child said, her eyes wide with wonder. "The one about the humans." Her grandfather smiled, his skin rippling with soft hues of nostalgia. "They were small," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But they were mighty. They showed us that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire that burns across the stars." The child's gaze lingered on the trail of light, her heart swelling with hope. "Do you think I'll meet a human one day?" "Perhaps," her grandfather replied. "And when you do, remember this. They're not so different from us. Brave, flawed, and always reaching for something greater. The child smiled, her thoughts already drifting to the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was still moving forward, still defying the odds, still reaching for the unknown. Would you join the coalition, knowing the sacrifices it took to achieve peace? How would you honor the legacy of those who fought for freedom? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to HFY Genesis for more tales of courage, unity, and hope. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.